Over the Garden Wall is an animated TV series that aired for just 1 week in November of 2014, but for some of its fans, it's become required viewing every fall since. So what's the secret formula that creator Patrick McHale and his team found to make this little miniseries so rewatchable? It may be the cozy bucolic imagery, the delightfully spooky tone, or the cultural nostalgia reaching back generations. It might be all the fun references to classic cartoons you can find, or all of its parallels to Dante's Inferno in terms of plot, setting, structure, and characters, but I think it's the rich themes this 10-episode miniseries explores that people really connect with. Innocence, responsibility, hope, despair, trust, agency, and at the top of it all, there's the main theme that drives the entire story forward. I'm talking, of course, about the most primal survival instinct we have, the most basic of human emotions. It's love. Over the Garden Wall is a love story, but not just about romantic love like most other love stories. This is about all love. Brotherly love, the love between friends, and even that overly dependent, maybe not so healthy kind of love. See, a while back, ancient Greek philosophers came up with around 9-ish different words for all of the warm fuzzies us people feel toward each other. Depending on who you ask, there could be more or less. Funny enough, with Over the Garden Wall, if you take these 9 love words and assign them each to a different chapter of the show, you get a full episode devoted to each kind of love. But what's that, you say? There are 10 chapters, but only 9 loves? Oh, we'll get to that. Because not only do these chapters exemplify the different types of love, they also help our protagonist Wirt along his way in his character arc, which just might tie into our missing chapter without any love. In fact, it's Wirt's lack of love that is kind of the central conflict to the series. Over the Garden Wall may be a love story, but it's not about all of the smiles and rainbows that love has to offer. This show is about how scary love can be. Making yourself vulnerable to someone leaves you wide open to getting hurt, and loving someone all but guarantees intense sadness someday in the future when that person either leaves you or dies. So this miniseries poses the question, if love is so risky, then why do we love at all? Well, to find the answer, come with me into the unknown, a mysterious place that few have seen, where long-forgotten stories are revealed to those who travel through the wood. Naturally, before we dive into any story, theme, or character arc, we gotta know the character that will be doing said arcing. Wirt is our protagonist this time, and we meet him as he finds himself lost in the woods with his brother Greg, and a frog. Here at the start of his journey, we get a nice little list of all the character flaws he's going to need to overcome. Let's start with Wirt's relationship to love, the thing I'm claiming to be the theme of this entire work. One of the first things Wirt says in this whole series pertains to his freshly broken heart.
Though I am lost, my wounded heart resides back home in pieces, strewn about the graveyard of my lost love.
We don't know the details at the moment, but we see him pining for someone he can't be with. And the mention of a graveyard makes it sound like it's a pretty done deal with no hope. Content to be slightly forlorn, Wirt romanticizes his sad experience via poetic language that he recites to an audience of himself. Wirt sees love as a thing that is out of reach for him, and will continue to assume that for much of this story. We'll see that this certainly doesn't pertain solely to romantic love, and one of the causes of this problem may have something to do with his next flaw.
Do you think it's some kind of deranged lunatic with an axe waiting out there in the darkness for innocent victims?
Wirt always assumes the worst of people. When he first meets the woodsman, the only responsible adult around this mysterious forest, who really only means to help, Wirt assumes the guy is going to kill him. Granted, this whole place is a bit creepy, so maybe it's good to be a little guarded, but Wirt also refuses the help of Beatrice, a friendly little bluebird he meets. His initial fear of others, and his refusal to accept help, will be a recurring problem for Wirt in many of the upcoming chapters, because trusting people requires a bit of a gamble, and Wirt will avoid trouble at all costs.
Greg, you're gonna get us into trouble again.
In fact, Wirt is afraid of taking any risks. He never wants to mess up. He second-guesses every instinct he has, so he'll have someone else take the risk for him, usually his naive little brother, and then blame them if something goes wrong. Or he'll just do nothing and then regret it.
We should ask him for help.
No, we should not ask him for help. Shoot. You think we should have asked him for help?
Wirt can't handle the responsibility of failure, and thus has a hard time making any progress on his own. And of course, let's not forget the obvious.
Greg, I think we're lost.
Wirt is lost. Literally lost in the woods, as we can see, but as we get to know Wirt, we'll see this being lost in the woods as a metaphor for being lost in life. Like when traversing the dark wilderness, Wirt is unsure, scared, and wandering through life mostly alone. The woods and the world of the unknown represent Wirt's personal struggle.
Welcome to the unknown, boys. You're more lost than you realize.
So now we've established that Wirt is a lonely, untrusting, defensive little guy aimlessly fumbling through life. But at least he's doing it his way, baby. right? Well, in this first chapter, we hit upon our first Greek word for love, Astorge, which ironically is not a word meaning love at all. It's actually the absence of love. Astorge is the lack of natural affection, unsociability. Wirt shows a lack of empathy when he entertains a plan to knock out the helpful woodsman and run away, or when he sends his defenseless little brother out into the dark wilderness when he gets too inconvenient to talk to. Wirt's not spiteful or evil. That would require too much passion. He's just self-centered and kind of indifferent to others. He just wants to be left alone. Wirt's lack of connection with other people or his own emotions cause him to feel empty inside.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just like a boat upon a winding river, twisting towards an endless black sea, further and further drifting away from where I want to be, who I want to be.
Wirt feels aimless, like he has no control over anything. This, of course, can be attributed to his defeatist attitude, his indecisiveness, and his self-isolation. He wants a better life, but he just doesn't see the way to get there. This is the starting point for our protagonist's character arc, and we'll see these themes of lovelessness and isolation reflected with the woodsman as well.
Everyone has a torch to burn, and this here is mine. I grind the horrid hazelwood trees into oil to keep this lantern lit. This is my lot in life. This is my burden.
We don't know all of the details this early in the story, but like Wirt, the woodsman has also resigned himself to a life of solitude, carrying out this mournful task every day for the rest of his life. Later on, we'll come to know that this Sisyphean obligation is very much tied to the pain of the lost love and his inability to cope with it. While Wirt may be concerned that he'll get hurt if he cares too much, the woodsman has already been hurt by caring for someone, and now he's closed himself off from everyone. The parallel implies that if Wirt continues down this path of self-isolation and lovelessness, he too will be consumed by a dark, unfulfilling existence, just like the woodsman before him. In this chapter, the woodsman also gives the boys advice about avoiding an entity called the Beast that lurks these woods. Wirt is unsure whether or not to believe the woodsman at first, but eventually, while he's preoccupied, reflecting on his miserable state,
What's happening? Where's your brother?
Huh?
a big nasty dog monster attacks the old mill they're staying in.
It's the beast!
Wirt and Greg are forced to run, only narrowly escaping its deadly jaws by distracting it with some candy and accidentally exorcising the evil turtle out of it. In the process, the whole mill is destroyed, leaving the woodsman without the means to complete his endless work. All things considered, this guy takes it pretty well. These kids just show up and ruin his whole setup. Sure, he's pretty devastated, but he doesn't take it out on them. He even tries to give them more advice. A far cry from the axe-wielding maniac that Wirt had him pegged as. Maybe people aren't as bad as you think. But hey, at least they conquered the beast, right?
The dog? That is not the beast!
The woodsman is quick to set this straight, because the beast, the real beast, is not loud and bombastic like the dog monster, nor is he able to be defeated through dumb luck. He's slow and scheming. In the shadows. You won't see him coming, and when you do, he's already in your head. The woodsman calls him the death of hope, which is pretty much literally what he is. The beast represents the danger of giving into despair, accepting that things will not get better, that you will not find your way home. Someone who's already lost, like Wirt, will certainly be easy prey for a creature like this. Wirt attempts to blame Greg for the collapse of the mill, but the woodsman won't have it.
You are the elder child. You are responsible for you and your brother's actions.
Yes, among other things, Wirt is going to need to learn how to accept responsibility in his character arc. The woodsman then tells the boys to go north and look for a town, and leaves them with these parting words.
Beware the unknown. Fear the beast and leave these woods. It is your burden to bear.
Right, yeah, got it.
Since the woodsman represents what Wirt could become if his character arc were to go differently, it's natural that he would give the thesis of this first chapter. It is your burden to bear. The woodsman, the lonely worker doomed to a life of solitude, is telling Wirt something he already kinda believes. Stay away from strange new experiences, keep fear in your heart, protect yourself at all costs, but most of all, he's in this alone. Navigating the dismal, winding woods of life with all of its horrors is all on Wirt's shoulders to take on by himself, and that emptiness he feels is just his duty or purpose, his burden to bear. This isn't a great outlook, but we'll start to see in the upcoming chapters that sometimes when you're not expecting it, love can grow from the most unlikely of places, and maybe save your life. As Wirt, our little leaf in the wind, and his brother Greg find a town in which to get their bearings, they're interrupted by Beatrice, the bluebird they meet earlier. They free her from a thorn bush she claims to be stuck in, and as a reward, she says she'll do them a favor.
I get a wish? Not a wish. I'm not magical. I'll just do you a good turn.
Can you turn me into a tiger?
Beatrice cuts to the chase.
You two are lost kids with no purpose in life, right?
Well, she's got you there.
How about I bring you to Adelaide of the pasture, the good woman of the woods? She could help you get home.
Wirt doesn't trust her. He doesn't trust her inciting incident. She's too weird.
Magic talking birds leading us to fairy godmothers and the mysterious... I'm going to Pottsfield.
Although we can already sense that there's something a bit off about how Beatrice conducts herself, judging by the way she very obviously wasn't stuck and really wants to bring these boys to this Adelaide person, Wirt still doesn't have the ability to trust most people in the first place. Wirt has no reason to take a risk on this random nobody. He wants to solve getting home his own way. They all go to the town of Pottsfield, where Wirt can take all his cues from the locals instead of a strange bird, not before stepping on a bunch of pumpkins on the side of the road.
I stepped on a pumpkin!
Wandering into town, the now trio and Frog discover a barn brimming with the jovial sounds of music and celebration. Inside, they find a peculiar gathering of people festively dressed in costumes of pumpkin, corn husk, and straw.
So it's some kind of weird cult.
That's right, Wirt. It is some kind of weird cult, because this party definitely has some religious undertones. Here in Chapter 2, we come upon our first real, actual Greek love term, agape. In the biblical sense of the word, agape is the fatherly love of God for all of humanity and his people's adoration for him. And yeah, Over the Garden Wall is by no means an explicitly Christian work of literature, nor is this channel interested in getting too deep into any religion for that matter. But this story draws heavy inspiration from Dante's Inferno, which is an explicitly Christian work of literature. And a portion of the show's themes seem to overlap with some of the philosophy of C.S. Lewis, who, if you know anything about that guy, you know he's a fan of the Bible. Now, thankfully for the YouTube algorithm, the pumpkin people in Pottsville don't worship the Christian god, but they do appear to look to a different higher power, Enoch, the giant potentacled pumpkin man, or magical talking cat in pumpkin costume if you prefer. Enoch, whose name may have even been pulled from the Bible, may be this community's god, or at least their pastor, but in any case, he seems to be the one in charge. We'll see a bit later that he either has the power to bring everlasting life to the dead, or at the very least oversees the process of resurrection. He seems to have nothing to gain from this process other than to share his love with all the souls he's saving from oblivion, and invite them to a forever party with a bunch of nice pumpkin folks. But what really drives this home is a concept which I'll paraphrase from The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. See, I told you he'd show up. According to him, agape love is theorized to be the one love that would transcend into the afterlife, as all the other kinds of love are based on earthly conditions. Carnal loves and loves of convenience and happenstance would be too secular to even exist in a divine and non-corporeal setting. All earthly love, or natural love, is left behind. No, these osteological revelers are not of flesh and blood anymore. They are now in their own heaven, experiencing eternal bliss with the only love one can actually have there, agape. Yet another aspect of agape worth noting is the concept of an agape feast, which seems to be exactly what our characters have wandered into. This Christian tradition is a gathering that's held to promote good feelings, reconciliation, and to show someone affectionate honor, all applicable when reanimating one of your dead buddies to join your town of skeletons. At an agape feast, there's plenty of food, such as the crops that were harvested, religious hymns, like the ones sung in the barn, and is often presided over by a priest, like Enoch, for example. The agape feast is even sometimes used to describe certain funerary gatherings, which is almost exactly what these guys are up to, but, you know, in reverse. So yeah, when Wirt says this is some kind of weird cult, we as an audience are being clued in that this gathering is indeed modeled after a religious ceremony, though this one, of course, being a fictionalized and pumpkin-themed one. It's shorthand for us to comprehend the deep love and devotion, the agape, that the pumpkin people must feel toward their community and Enoch, their benevolent savior. So jumping back to the plot, when Enoch finds the travelers having just trampled his crops and interrupting the party he was throwing, he confronts them. Naturally, Wirt assumes their sentence will be a harsh one, because he always assumes people want to hurt, kill, or otherwise punish him for existing. However, he's pleased to find that all Enoch wants is for them to help with today's harvest. Maybe people aren't as bad as you think. Over the next few hours, Wirt, Greg, and Beatrice assist with gathering crops and a few other tasks. Wirt even appears to get some satisfaction out of the whole thing. He looks as though he's accomplishing something important, which is a good step forward for him. However, during this montage, a song plays, which of course I can't play for you. Patient is the Night is about looking forward to a nice rest after a long day of work. Well, of course this song is applicable. After all, they're all doing work, waiting to be done with it right now. But at the same time, it seems to thematically tie into Wirt's character arc, and maybe even the town of dead people he's hanging out in. We've seen that that Wirt is beyond simply being an introvert. He's painfully risk-averse, and at the same time troubled by his lack of connection with the world. Wirt plays it safe by sticking to menial tasks instead of engaging with people. Essentially, he's a lost kid with no purpose in life. He's, like the song implies, just waiting for his last nightfall so he can finally rest. Wirt is wasting his lifetime like so many laborers might waste away their hours at work. At the end of their shift, Wirt and the others are digging some holes in a field. When Wirt comments that there's only a bit more left to do today, Beatrice confronts him with a philosophical question.
And then what are you gonna do? Just wander around this way and that way through the woods forevermore?
Maybe we'll just stay here in Pottsfield. It's nice here. I don't know.
While this line can be taken literally, it also sums up the problem Wirt's been having emotionally. Wirt is lost in the metaphorical woods, always wandering because commitment is a risk that is too scary for him. Becoming vulnerable is too much. When Beatrice asks what he's going to do with the rest of his forever, it's perhaps the first time Wirt has actually had to confront the trajectory of his life. Is Wirt really going to take the path of least resistance forever, knowing full well this method already makes him unhappy? Is he just, as the song suggests, clocked in until the workday's over? Or is he going to have to take a risk and trust someone who has the ability to potentially hurt him? Unlike the woodsman who reinforced Wirt's hopeless view of the world, Beatrice is forcing him to look at things more pragmatically. The woodsman says, protect yourself at all costs. But then Beatrice asks, okay then, safety boy, what's that plan look like exactly? He isn't ready yet, but by the end of his arc, Wirt is going to have a definitive answer to Beatrice's question about wandering in the woods. Suddenly, they're digging unearths something rather disturbing. Human remains. Wirt sees this and of course assumes that they too are going to be put in the ground.
We're digging our own. I was wrong all along. I don't know how to get us home.
Now feeling that he's in immediate mortal danger, a chunk of Wirt's defensive wall is instantly torn down. He's willing, desperate even, to take a risk on this talking bluebird. Maybe she'll be a good friend. Maybe she'll be a cruel enemy. But anything's better than dying right now.
Yes, I want your help.
Wirt doesn't know how to fix himself. He can't get out of the woods alone in the state he's in. He needs other people to help him find happiness. With this realization comes the show's main story. It's the story of how Wirt goes from a lost child wandering the loveless woods of his life alone to a decisive adult willing to take a risk and accept other people and himself and all of the unpredictability that comes with it. This is the story of how Wirt risks it all to let other people into his cold, impenetrable heart and saves himself from a terrible, lonely fate. This is Wirt's love arc. As Wirt stalls for time while Beatrice tries to break their shackles, the little bluebird and Greg actually make an escape. Of course, Wirt assumes they've left him behind to suffer at the hands of the pumpkin people, because Wirt always assumes the worst of everyone.
They left me.
But once again, the truth is not so sinister. Enoch didn't want them to dig their own graves, he wanted to dig up his friends' graves so we can reanimate them for a party. And yeah, Beatrice and Greg didn't leave Wirt after all. They broke his shackle and were waiting for him.
Why are you still here?
Maybe people aren't as bad as you think. As pleasant as this skeleton community seems, Wirt sees that if he stays where he is, he'll be joining the land of the dead a bit too early. And understandably, this is off-putting to him.
You sure you want to leave?
Me? Yes.
Maybe agape love is what awaits Wirt when he passes on, but there's still too much life ahead of him to find that out now, so he probably shouldn't waste his time while he still has it.
Oh, well, you'll join us someday.
Wirt leaves with Beatrice, and at this point he's willing to take the risk and trust her to get them home. From this little adventure, she's already proven herself to be helpful enough.
Why are you going to Adelaide's?
I guess in some ways, I'm trying to get home too.
That's vague. What does that mean?
I don't have to tell you anything.
Even though, to us viewers, it's heavily implied Beatrice is up to no good, she's pushed Wirt out of his comfort zone into a place where more love can be experienced. But we'll have to see how Wirt, our little leaf in the wind, fares in Act 2, when he puts his trust in someone who's really not as benevolent as she appears. As our travelers traverse the terrain, Greg breaks out into song about their trip. However, Wirt does not join in, as at this point he hates fun, because fun requires you to make a fool out of yourself occasionally, and Wirt does not have the self-confidence for something like that. In fact, during this scene, Wirt is trying to tie his shoelaces, but keeps getting interrupted by Beatrice telling him to pick up the pace. Wirt's self-confidence is so lacking that even for his own safety, he won't take the time to think about himself if someone with authority tells him to do otherwise. Wirt's lack of self-assurance makes him completely passive. Greg's mirthful attitude also annoys Beatrice. She wants to be over and done with these boys, and because of some pressing nefariousness she needs to resolve, Beatrice gives Greg some bad advice.
Don't you want to be more like your brother? Just always doing what you're told?
Huh?
Just a pathetic pushover who relies on others to make all his decisions?
Hey!
Wirt doesn't like taking risks, but he resents the concept that he has no will of his own.
See, Greg? No willpower whatsoever.
That doesn't really sound that fun.
The world is a miserable place, Greg. Life isn't fun.
After hearing how terrible the world is, Greg feels they need to make it a better place, and darts off into the woods. This finds the group at an old-timey schoolhouse inhabited by a class of woodland creatures in human clothes. The teacher, Miss Langtree, asks them to take their seats. Beatrice replies with this snarky comment.
Oh, sorry, everybody, sorry. No, he doesn't have a brain. He can't learn anything.
Oh, did you say something? I can't hear you because I'm too busy doing what I'm told.
Wirt has gone from passive to passive-aggressive. Wirt takes his seat and for the rest of the day plays the mindless pushover that Beatrice accused him of being. He is, in his own perverse way, finally exercising some of his will, albeit in an absolutely unproductive manner. Beatrice hates wasting time on this meaningless side quest. She wants to get these boys to Adelaide, and Wirt's pointless act of defiance is really slowing things down for her.
Hey, dunce, this is dreadful.
Good. I'm glad you feel that way.
Wirt wants to live his life safely and methodically, and this bird is going to regret challenging him on that. True, he may be indecisive at times, but he's determined to prove he's not a pushover. By doing what he does best, letting someone else do all the work for him, Wirt has the advantage over his avian adversary. For now. In this classroom setting, we learn a bit more about the teacher. Miss Langtree has recently been left by her boyfriend, and she's not taking it well.
Oh, Jimmy Brown, why did you have to leave me so?
Ooh, that lady's got some baggage.
Yeah, this lady does have some baggage, because we just stumbled upon this chapter's love word. Mania, or obsessive love. It's an emotionally dependent love, requiring constant companionship. A love with sharp peaks and valleys of joy and sorrow. Someone experiencing the mania variant of love will hold their partner in impossibly high esteem, and when they're not loved in the same way in return, they'll see their partner as aloof and detached. When Jimmy got himself trapped in a gorilla costume, as we'll discover momentarily, Langtree assumed he'd just run off and left her. She puts him down, calling him a
no good, two-timing, low-down, handsome man of mine.
But of course, she still loves him. Her love for Jimmy Brown is consuming her every waking moment. She's a puddle on the floor singing songs about her boyfriend to her classroom of bewildered woodlanders. To Langtree, love is a drug, and she's a junkie for it. Jumping back to the story, after class time, the students shuffle off to have some food. Wirt is about to dig in, but Beatrice stops him.
Hey, nobody ordered you to eat yet.
Yeah, but...
Beatrice can be just as pedantic as Wirt and knows how to poke holes in his bad logic. She thinks she's got him this time, but Wirt puts his spoon down and obeys just like he said he would. What started out as snarky and defiant is now getting in Wirt's own way, but he's too committed to the bit to give up now. Who really loses when Wirt acts like this? After Greg tries to bring joy into the world by leading the animals in a song, Langtree's father storms in and threatens to close the place down. After all, this was a school to teach animals to count and spell, not have fun. That night, as Greg contemplates how his plan backfired on him, Beatrice and Wirt share a moment.
Okay, Wirt, you seem like a pushover, but you're not. You're a stubborn jerk. When are you gonna give this up?
Maybe never. Maybe I'll never give this up.
Here, Wirt's passivity has created a scenario wherein he's not liable for anything that goes wrong. Wirt gets to drag his feet and not do anything, even to his detriment, like what happened with dinner. But his inaction is all in response to Beatrice saying he has no willpower. If anything were to go wrong due to this, Wirt can just blame her for insulting him. And at the same time, Wirt can hide himself from anything scary that were to come up. He has no responsibility and thus no blame. Wirt is exerting his will over Beatrice, his will to do nothing. Stubbornness for the sake of stubbornness. There's no value to it other than for Wirt to affirm his flawed beliefs. And there's very little Beatrice can do about it. And as we're seeing, Wirt's unwillingness to take responsibility is not just stunting his own development, it's also having a negative effect on those around him.
Bluebirds have a short lifespan. You two are literally killing me every moment I'm forced to spend with you.
Wirt isn't a pushover per se, but he's also really not helping anyone with this. This will soon manifest into Wirt's responsibility arc, at the end of which Wirt will go out of his way to take on risks to help others. As Wirt keeps trying to conform to the world and make other people's lives harder, Greg keeps trying to improve the world and make a positive impact. And no matter how many setbacks he faces, he just keeps trying. Greg tells Wirt they're gonna go out there and save the day, so Wirt has to comply, as to keep up his spiteful game with Beatrice. Led by Greg, the three of them, and the frog, sneak out to find Langtree's father monologuing about how he has no money left to keep the school open. He seems to really care about this endeavor, but here we see him take a fairly passive approach to fixing his problems.
If only something would go right for a change.
Sure, he talks a big game and he wears a big coat, and maybe he shouldn't have been so harsh before, but underneath it all, he's probably not such a bad guy. He's just at the end of his rope and doesn't really see a way forward. Maybe people aren't as bad as they use the old man's instruments to form an animal band to help raise money for the school, finally fulfilling Greg's wish to make the world a better place. And look at all the people donating their money.
All these fine people giving out of the goodness of their hearts.
Things are looking nice for this little community. And then the gorilla shows up, and everyone is very scared. The ever-passive Mr. Langtree turns to Wirt for aid.
Young man, do something!
And since Wirt is now committed to follow every command he hears, he blindly runs toward the gorilla, not quite sure how this will all resolve. With his yet-to-be-tied shoelaces, Wirt trips and smashes into the gorilla, revealing that the wild beast was actually Miss Langtree's Jimmy Brown in disguise.
Got a job in the circus so's I could finally buy you that wedding ring. But when I got stuck in the dang suit, everybody was too doggone scared to help me out.
Miss Langtree pined away for her lost boyfriend, but like the other townspeople, she never did anything to help find him. Inaction and submitting to fear was easier for everyone, but ultimately it left them a lot worse off, keeping these lovers apart from each other. It sure didn't help that Langtree assumed Jimmy Brown was a no-good jerk for leaving her. He was simply trapped in a gorilla costume. Maybe people aren't as bad as you think. But it was Wirt's action that finally resolved this problem. Even though it was accidental and for questionable reasons, just by getting involved, Wirt had a clear positive effect on people's lives. If you don't want to be a pushover, there are two ways to exercise your will: action and inaction. Inaction has been Wirt's go-to impulse. Wirt wants agency over his life, but fears the responsibility of actually making choices. But inaction just makes things worse for everyone, including himself. Maybe after tricking himself into taking action for once, Wirt can be proud of the fact that his flirt with bravery did a lot more than stubbornness when it comes to bringing love into this world. Even if that love is between, I don't know, she's fine. She's fine. Let's all be nicer to Langtree. Come on. He left without... I think we've all got issues, okay? And perhaps Wirt's personal connection with a snarky little bluebird is just what he needs to challenge his conundrum.
Wirt,
Yeah?
tie your shoe.
Oh.
Wirt and the others find themselves in the back of a carriage of a freaked-out driver who's fleeing from the beast.
The beast is upon me!
That crazy driver's taking us way off course.
The driver's fear of what he can't even perceive is taking them further and further from where they want to be.
Further and further, drifting away from where I want to be.
Eventually, they come across an ominous-looking tavern where they devise a new plan to ask for directions and get back on the road to Adelaide's house. But Wirt is hesitant. He's concerned about the creepy clientele that may patronize the old place. Again, he assumes the worst of everybody. He first suggests that he stay outside, but then he realizes that would leave him alone in the dark.
Just go to the tavern!
Okay, but you asked for directions.
Fine, yeah, I'll do everything.
Wirt doesn't want to be the guy stuck talking to these strange people. He'd rather someone else do it. So with Beatrice taking the lead, he really doesn't have to risk much of anything. Well, as a twist of fate, the superstitious tavern keeper doesn't care much for bluebirds. So Beatrice is forced to exit, leaving it up to Wirt to get directions from this group of intimidating people. Beatrice and Greg, and I guess that frog too, are all depending on him. Wirt is forced to take on responsibility for the well-being of others. And though he doesn't care much for this obligation right now, we'll see his responsibilities grow from here over the course of his character arc, and yes, even this very chapter, until he becomes someone who runs toward responsibility instead of having it reluctantly thrust upon him. Though it was alluded to before, this story beat marks the true start of Wirt's responsibility arc. Among the patrons, Wirt finds that everyone in the tavern has a different role to play in society. The butcher, the baker, the midwife, master and apprentice, highwayman, everyone has a title. But Wirt doesn't see himself confined in this way.
I don't really like labels. I'm just sort of like myself.
Although it's fine to keep yourself open to new possibilities, especially at this young age, it speaks to Wirt's inability to commit to anything in fear of making a mistake. He doesn't really have anything that defines him. He's only thus far defined by what he doesn't do, like in this deleted scene.
Beatrice, this was your idea.
My idea was for you to commandeer this thing and to drive it to Adelaide's yourself.
I'm not gonna just hijack stuff. I'm not a hijacker.
Well, what are you, Wirt? What are you?
It's not canon, but they were thinking about this when they wrote it. When Wirt asks for directions to get to Adelaide's house, the tavern folk mistake her for his girlfriend, and they finally give him the label they think he deserves.
You're the young lover.
What? Young lover?
They seem way off base here. After all, Wirt isn't looking to hook up with Adelaide, he's just trying to get home. But remember that lost love that Wirt was lamenting about in the first chapter? Well, that was indeed a reference to the love of a girl he likes back at home, so maybe they're not quite as off base as Wirt thinks. The toy maker goes on to sing a song about all the work the people in the tavern get to do when there's a marriage in town. You could read this as a bit of silly commentary on the hollowness of consumerism, perhaps, but it's also a song showing that the happiness of a young couple can ripple through the community, giving everyone else purpose and the money they need to survive. Just by being happy with someone, Wirt could theoretically benefit an entire town.
There's work for all when little boys get married.
Or at least this tavern. When Wirt can finally get a word in edgewise, he lets the people know he's actually looking for directions to get out of here, and that's when he's labeled with a new title.
I know what you are. You're a pilgrim, a traveler on a sacred journey. The hero of those.
story.
You're the master of your own destiny.
A pilgrim.
This pep talk has perhaps awoken something inside of Wirt. He clearly likes the label of pilgrim. He wants to be the kind of guy who does what he wants and follows his desires. Wirt wants to have control over his life. He doesn't want to be blown around like a leaf in the wind or a lost ship upon a winding river. He doesn't want to be defined by nothing. He wants his journey to be his purpose. Among all that's occurred in the tavern this evening, we're now starting to see the love word of this chapter, Xenia, or hospitality. Xenia is the love you show toward a guest as you give them food, shelter, entertainment, and companionship. Or love shown toward a host, giving them patronage, interesting tales of your journeys, as well as your respect and thankfulness. It's the trust we all give each other when we spend time with new people. Xenia is generosity among strangers. And although the people of the tavern seem a bit misguided here and there, their hearts are in the right place. Like when they pledge their talents and expertise to Wirt during the marriage song, or when they give Wirt the label of pilgrim, carrying him upon their shoulders, finally imbuing him with a sense of purpose. They even sing a rather informative song about the beast so that Wirt learns about how he too can be turned into an edelwood tree and burned for his oil if he were to succumb to the creature's dark treachery.
Don't believe his lies.
But perhaps the most intimate moment is when the apprentice gives Wirt this bit of advice.
You don't need directions, pilgrim. You follow that compass inside your heart.
It feels kind of like a simple joke, poking fun at the uselessness of reductive cliches. But considering how Wirt eventually gets out of the unknown, which is not by any physical means, but by overcoming his own insecurities, this is probably the best advice he gets in the whole series. Suddenly, Wirt hears Beatrice scream from outside. He knows he has to step it up and help her, and his new hospitable companions cheer him on to save the day. It's the last push he needs to take the initiative and be the hero of the hour.
Oh boy, I guess I'm really doing this.
Wirt runs into the night and sees the woodsman standing over a fallen Beatrice. Wirt, as always, assumes the worst of everyone and fights the old man off to save the bird. He is a little confused at the moment, but at least he's being brave and decisive about it. Let's give him a point for character arc.
No, too much. Perfect.
Once Wirt escapes with Beatrice, we get a glimpse of the beast for the first time, and we get a better understanding of the burden of the woodsman, in that he must chop wood for lantern fuel or the soul of his daughter will be lost forever. In the end, Wirt saved his animal guide, who just knocked herself out getting scared by a weird shadow.
I wonder what that was.
Wirt even got directions from a talking horse, a horse that Beatrice spent the last hour with and just assumed it was a normal non-talking horse. Wirt actually did a better job than Beatrice this time. And this is the same guy who was content to be led around by a lost and aimless carriage driver. Now he's the one steering the horse, and with clear directions. In this chapter, we see Wirt's growth toward responsibility, to himself and to those around him. By just existing, he has an influence on other people, and he chooses if it's positive, like giving back to the community, or negative, like the highwayman who's probably killed people. In having accomplished his navigational goals, the pilgrim now has a better sense of purpose for his sacred journey. Wirt assumed the people in the tavern would all be creeps, but for the most part, they were very friendly to him. They were weirdos, but generally nice. You know, maybe...
Blah, 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 blah.
The adventurers, and a talking horse, this time find themselves in the mansion of obscenely wealthy tea mogul Quincy Endicott. Posing as his nephews, Wirt and Greg hope to get 2 pennies from him so they could ride the ferry for the next leg of their trip. Mr. Endicott has been feeling so lonely in his big empty house, he almost feels like he's losing his mind. So of course he welcomes his guests. Like Wirt, Endicott has cut himself off from the world, but even his tremendous wealth brings him little comfort without people in his life.
The bigger my mansion gets, the more lost I feel.
Wirt isn't super into the idea of tricking this guy out of his money, but Beatrice and Fred the horse don't mind stealing from someone this rich.
Fred's a talking horse. He can do whatever he wants.
I want to steal.
Considering it is such a low amount, Wirt eventually gives in and follows Beatrice on a quest to find 2 cents for their boat fare. Meanwhile, Greg and Fred go with Endicott on a different search. Allegedly, there's a beautiful ghost that's been haunting Endicott's house, as well as his thoughts. Endicott saw a portrait of a mysterious woman in his home, and now believes she may be wandering his halls as an apparition. Unfortunately, he doesn't quite know truly if it was a ghost or if he's gone mad from isolation. And frankly, he's a bit too afraid to find either answer to be true. But Greg is insistent. He really wants to see a ghost. With the help of a new little friend, Endicott attempts to face his fears. While Wirt and Beatrice search the house for 2 cents and eventually get stuck in a closet, they pass the time by telling each other their backstories. Beatrice, we find out, was once a human, but was cursed to be a bird along with her entire family after she threw a rock at a bluebird not too long ago. Becoming the very thing you once abused? It sounds like classic fairy tale justice to me. Someone's got to learn a little bit about empathy.
All I know is I am never going back till I can make them human again. I'd do pretty much anything.
We already have a sense that Beatrice is up to no good. good. Her plan to take the boys to Adelaide's house has been mired in suspicious behavior this whole time. But here we see Beatrice might not be entirely so bad. She's just so desperate to save her family. She loves them and is obviously ashamed that she's cursed them like this. Beatrice has been trying to maintain emotional distance from the boys to get through her nefarious deeds. But the natural tendency to empathize with others is starting to unravel her plan. Beatrice opening up about her trauma leads to Wirt opening up about his darkest secrets.
I have this crush on this girl.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
That's all?
Wirt is so protective of his emotions, the very idea of having a crush on someone leaves him so vulnerable that he considers it a dark, shameful secret.
And I think about her a lot, and I play clarinet. And I secretly whisper poetry to myself in my room at night.
That stuff's not weird. Those are just character traits.
Beatrice, a trusted acquaintance, lets him know that his feelings are quite normal, thus nudging Wirt a tiny bit further towards self-acceptance. She even shows some interest in his hobbies.
You play clarinet?
Sorta.
What else do you do?
Eventually, using his knowledge of Baroque architecture and decor, Wirt comes to a solution to Endicott's ghost mystery.
French Rococo style. That doesn't really seem in line with Endicott's Georgian sensibilities.
One thing leads to another, and the woman that Endicott saw in the painting finally appears to him.
Wait, Unky! Face your fears!
But the alleged ghost was no ghost at all, just another T-Mogul named Marguerite Gray. Wirt had pieced together that their mansions were so huge they actually connected. They've been living in the same house this whole time.
You mean that beautiful ghost was really my business competitor?
Endicott learned that the person he thought was an otherworldly spirit was actually a great match for him, and it's all owed to him facing his fear. Endicott and Gray just happened upon the most efficient love of all, Pragma, or pragmatic love, the love based on compatibility. Pragma is a love of convenience, like two people in an arranged marriage, or in another case, two people with mansions so big they actually live in the same house already. They don't even have to leave home to see each other. Pragma love can also be with people who share the same goals. In this case, two people running two very successful tea businesses, uniting to monopolize the market together. Pragma love is also symbiotic, giving each partner something out of the deal. Both Endicott and Gray seem to live alone, and now they won't be so lonely anymore. Plus, they both find each other pretty hot, so what's not to like there? They tick all of each other's compatibility boxes. Overall, the union of these two seems to be perfect, because sometimes love is a sound investment in your mutual futures. Endicott and Gray each give Greg a penny for helping them face their fears, which is pretty funny considering how much they could actually spare. And look, Fred got himself a job and doesn't want to steal anymore. Character arcs for everyone. At the end of this excursion, Beatrice actually gives Wirt a legit compliment.
Hey, Wirt, you did good back there.
Yeah?
You got a lot more going for you than I thought.
And that's great for both of them, since Beatrice is becoming more empathetic and Wirt is seeing that trusting people is nice sometimes. Maybe this is how you make friends. Wirt's not so great at that, but we'll discover that later. Finally, we see Greg dump the coins into the fountain, completely negating the whole reason they came to this place. Like Wirt, Greg also has some growing up to do, but we'll look over his character arc in more detail in a different video. On a riverboat, our travelers reflect on a journey that looks like it's about to come to an end. Funny, that's often the case at the midpoint of a story. This is the boat to Adelaide's house, and as far as the kids know, that's where they're going to find their way home. And for the first time since this miniseries began, our protagonist Wirt actually seems happy. He's smiling, joking, singing, laughing. So what's changed? Wirt has seen the many benefits of welcoming others into his life, friends to support him, a community to engage with, the joy of relationships, and even helping people. He sees that he matters to the world. Wirt sees all the good of sharing his time with others. Wirt sees the value of becoming vulnerable. Unfortunately for Beatrice, at this point she's too invested in Wirt and Greg's lives to betray them like she's planned. She knows that her only options are to A. Go ahead and hand them over to Adelaide, who is in fact an evil witch, and let her new friends suffer an unjust fate. B. Come clean about the danger she's been leading them toward, and have her new friends hate her forever for being so deceitful. C. Try to trick them into not going to Adelaide's house. If all goes well, her new friends will be safe and won't know just how bad a person she might be. Beatrice needs to work on her communication skills and own up to her mistakes. She still hasn't told her family that it's her fault they've been turned into bluebirds. Perhaps the best choice is to come clean, but that last option, the sort of sneaky one where she doesn't have to grow as a character, that's looking real good to her right now. But of course, if you remember, the gang never had any money to get on this boat, so naturally the frog police are looking to arrest them for sneaking on.
You take him, not me!
Yeah, Wirt's learned a thing or two. He's still all too eager to throw his little brother under the bus if it means he might not get in trouble. They end up disguising themselves as one very tall frog, with their little frog friend as the head, and saunter along to join the frog band. Beatrice sees an opportunity to get out of taking the boys to Adelaide's house.
Wirt, sometimes you gotta face your problems. Turn yourself in and get kicked off this boat.
That's generally good advice. It's just ironic that Beatrice is the one saying it. She wants Wirt to face his problem so that she doesn't have to face hers. When they take the stage, they realize they need a bassoon player to sell the bit.
No bassoon player.
Wirt feels very unsure of his bassoon-playing skills, but Beatrice is there to encourage him.
Hey, why don't you play the bassoon?
That'll get us kicked off this boat for sure.
No, Greg's right. You should play it. Go ahead, you'll do fine.
Though we know this comes less from a place of support and more out of a need to get Wirt kicked off the boat, Beatrice is technically being supportive. She doesn't have faith in Wirt, but she does want him to be safe. But nonetheless, this is the encouragement Wirt needs to believe in himself.
Seriously, nobody wants to hear me play.
I do. I do.
And Wirt, with his friends at his side, tries his best. So now we get our next love word, Philia, or friendship. This is the point of the story when Wirt and Beatrice's friendship comes into full bloom. They're not enemies, or allies, or accomplices. They have fun together. They care about each other now. They're friends. Although it's a friendship that's still a bit on shaky grounds, Beatrice would rather risk Wirt publicly humiliating himself with bad bassoon playing than own up to her misdeeds. But guess what? Wirt's actually pretty musically gifted, and so is the frog. And of course there's the song that the frog is singing. If you listen to the lyrics, which I obviously can't play for you, you'll hear that it's about a lonely person singing out into the night whose melody reaches over a vast wilderness to countless others who hear his tune and join in singing together. And then at the end, even you, dear listener, are invited to join in. The chorus of singers in the song's narrative reaches over the treetops and mountains, over the blackened ravines, then softly falls by a house near a stream, and over the garden wall to thee.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
I mean, he just said the title. It makes sense that this right here is the point of the entire series. The frog is performing a song about the bonds of togetherness between all of us in an otherwise cold and indifferent world. All it takes is for someone to reach out. That night around a campfire, Wirt talks about his doomed love for his crush Sarah, his rival in love Jason Funderburker, and how Greg keeps getting in the way of his romantic plans. Wirt is quick to blame others for his lack of courage. Once again, Beatrice tries to do what she can to keep Wirt from danger and herself out of trouble.
Sounds like you're a real loser back home.
Compare that line to the previous,
You got a lot more going for you than I thought.
one is honest and one is a little more self-serving.
Oh, thanks a lot.
I mean, compared to how you are here. Here, you're like a hero and stuff, right?
Well, I don't know if I'd say hero, but...
If I was you, I wouldn't even want to go home.
Yeah, maybe it is better to stay here.
Great, then it's agreed we're not going to Adelaide's. Good night, Wirt.
Wirt is not confident enough to take his newfound lust for life and apply it back home. This journey's kind of been too easy on him. He has no idea if he can weather the real hardships. In this adventure so far, Wirt has seen all the best parts of love and togetherness, yet he still doesn't believe in himself. He doesn't love himself. Beatrice cares for Wirt, but she still doesn't respect his agency. Wirt needs to leave this place and go home, and it would be best for him to make an informed decision about his life and make his own choices. But Beatrice is too concerned about her own reputation to acknowledge that right now. While Wirt and Greg are asleep, Beatrice flies out to alter her deal with Adelaide. It's here we actually find out the depth of Adelaide's plan. Beatrice was to deliver some children to her so that they can be changed into her zombie-like servants, completely removing their agency. In exchange, Beatrice would get a pair of magic scissors that would change her and her family back to human form. Beatrice, now feeling quite awful about all of this, offers to take their place and be her servant to spare the boys from this fate. But before that deal goes down, Wirt and Greg arrive, having followed her over. Suddenly the boys are captured in a yarn trap and finally see what Beatrice had planned for them all along. Wirt is rather disillusioned by this turn of events. He actually values his autonomy, even if he doesn't exercise it very much.
I thought we were friends.
You are friends, Wirt, and this is literally the friendship chapter. But it's still a big step for Wirt to admit that. He didn't want to be friends with Beatrice. He didn't even want to talk to her. But since then, they've been through a lot together. The boys manage to escape with the help of the magic scissors, and Beatrice kills off the old witch by exposing her to clean, fresh air. But it's too late. Wirt leaves before seeing Beatrice's change of heart.
I shouldn't have trusted anyone.
Wirt didn't get to see that. Here at the midpoint of the story, Wirt's fears and concerns are tested. He never wanted to trust Beatrice, but over time he opened up to her. He shared his secrets with her. He began to see the joy in connecting with another person. And then, just like he predicted, she was only out to get him. Wirt always assumes the worst of everyone, and this only proved to him that he was right yet again. Yes, Wirt has seen all the positives of love and togetherness, and now at the start of this second half, he'll see all the hurt that people can do to him. He'll see the risks and hardships that come with making yourself vulnerable. And so will Beatrice.
You two are literally killing me every moment I'm forced to spend with you. Please come back!
Every kind of love hurts when it's taken away. Without Beatrice, everything will be harder now. But as we saw, Wirt wasn't really ready to go home yet. Not ready to believe in himself without someone on the side prodding him on. Wirt's strength needs to be tested, or else his new experiences and change of perspective won't really mean anything. Wirt has to survive true heartbreak to really know what love is. While wandering the woods with Greg, Wirt searches for a place to wait out the rain. Greg asks why they're leaving Beatrice behind.
I don't need Beatrice. I'll figure this out on my own.
Wirt has been hurt by love after Beatrice seemingly betrayed him, so Wirt just wants to go it alone again. And now there's not a lot stopping him. Beatrice was always the one prodding Wirt, and getting him to reconsider his myopic worldview, challenging his stubborn outlook.
I'm glad you have a plan. So what's the plan?
Greg, on the other hand, only agrees with everything Wirt says. He reflects Wirt's own bad thoughts back to him, unaware of their danger.
If you want to go look for Beatrice, go ahead. You can do anything you want.
Anything? That's a lot of power.
Eventually, they find an old house to wait out the rain.
I got it under control. I don't need Beatrice.
Wirt keeps telling himself he doesn't need anyone to get by in this world. While Greg and Wirt dry off in the house, they meet a girl about Wirt's age named Lorna. She seems sympathetic to them, but moments after they meet, someone comes to the front door. Auntie whispers, a dark looming figure who seems to be the harbinger of doom.
Your doom.
The boys infer real quick that if Auntie Whispers were to find them in the house, she would gobble them up.
Tell me where you are hiding them. The ringing of the bell commands you.
And by the way, she orders Lorna around with her magic bell, stripping her of all her agency, forcing her to do the housework.
Keeping you busy is the only way to keep the evil spirit from driving you to wickedness.
It's obvious to Wirt he has to be the hero that Beatrice says he was and get this girl out of here.
Gosh, that lady is so bad. You should go see a doctor.
Outsiders will lead me to become wicked.
Since Lorna is magically bound to do the chores by the magic bell, Wirt offers to help her finish the housework so that she has time to escape. Lorna likes this plan, and so begins their foray into this chapter's form of love, Ludus, or flirtatious love. Although Wirt has his heart set on Sarah back at home, Ludus love is a less serious, non-exclusive love for those who just want to have fun, share activities, and flirt with each other. And from the looks of it, Wirt has found someone just like him. They're both lost souls with no agency in life. One is controlled by a magic bell, the other one's controlled by self-doubt and fear.
Sometimes I feel like I'm just a boat upon a winding river.
Wirt's found his perfect match.
Like ships upon a winding river.
Wirt and Lorna spend the hours enjoying each other's company as they clean the house. And though the Ludus love between them is pretty innocent, the way they make each other blush certainly feels like a soft flirtation. Oftentimes, those sharing in Ludus love together will not reveal all of their true thoughts and feelings to each other, keeping things light and fun, presenting one's edited best self, knowing full well their partner's probably doing the same thing with them. However, in some cases, this omission can be used to gain a kind of advantage over a partner. For example, not letting your partner know that you're an ancient evil using a teenager's body as a vessel to lure young men to their doom. So, as it turns out, Lorna is possessed by an evil spirit who is really the one who is going to eat them all along. Not Auntie Whispers. Surprise, she was actually trying to save them. Well, people who aren't actual demons anyway. In the end, Wirt learned that the person he thought was a great match for him was actually an otherworldly spirit, like an Endicott, but in reverse. So the boys get chased for a while and eventually find that their frog swallowed the magic bell, so Wirt uses it to banish the spirit from Lorna's body. Now freed from the demon's influence, Lorna chooses to stay with Auntie Whispers.
Auntie, no.
Oh.
I would never leave you. You are my family.
Now that Lorna has her agency back, she no longer wants to leave with Wirt. It was the demon who agreed to Wirt's escape plan, which was mostly a plan to eat him and his brother, though Wirt's kindness has not gone unnoticed by the true Lorna.
Perhaps I'll see you again someday. I hope so.
As the boys leave, Wirt's now sadder than ever. He's been betrayed by a good friend, his kindness was exploited by an evil demon, he's been rejected by a new love interest, and he's only led himself and his brother into more danger. He's not the hero he thought he was.
We're still not any closer to getting home. I just don't know what I'm doing out here anymore. I don't know if we'll ever get back home.
You got a plan, remember?
I lied.
Wirt doesn't have a plan to get out of this mess, and he's not interested in opening himself up to anyone to get hurt again. He's on his own, and he's aimless once again, but now he's also heartbroken and lacks any shred of self-confidence. And it certainly doesn't help that the person who he identified with most in this place turned out to be a monster. Wirt's ennui has now transformed into despair because he dared to be vulnerable. And at the episode's close, we hear the ominous words of the beast as he readies himself to claim Wirt.
There is only me. There is only my way. There is only the forest, and there is only surrender.
Next, Greg and Wirt find themselves paddling a makeshift boat on a winding river, not realizing that Beatrice is still out there looking for them. Greg hears the beast singing in the distance.
Captain Wirt, do you know who's singing?
I don't know much of anything anymore.
Wirt's world has been shattered after all that's happened. He can't trust strangers, he can't trust friends, he can't trust himself. He's more lost than ever.
The obsidian cricket of our inevitable twilight singing our requiem.
And when he gets sad, he gets poetic about it.
We are but wayward leaves, scattered to the air by an indifferent wind.
He has no fight left in him.
Can we just admit we're never going to get back home, Greg? Can we do that?
This is the low end of Wirt's responsibility arc. Wirt doesn't see the point of pretending things will turn out for him, because in the end, he always seems to fail. Seeing no value in himself, Wirt relinquishes all responsibility and just gives up, putting Greg in charge by default. Greg, accepting the task of team leader, goes to sleep to dream up a plan to get them both home. In Greg's dream, he's transported into a cartoon heaven of sorts, where everything, as the song says, is nice and fine all the time. A purely innocent and childlike world of angels and animals and cute little songs. Even when things go bad in this world, like when the north wind threatens the playful gathering, Greg is able to contain it with very little effort. Near the end of his dream, Greg meets the Queen of the Clouds, who offers to grant him a wish. Last time Greg thought he could make a wish, he wanted to become a magical tiger.
It doesn't have to be a magical tiger.
But this time, when Greg gets a real wish, he wants to get himself and his brother back home. But he's told Wirt is too lost to be saved. He's bound in the Edelwood branches. So Greg tries to modify his wish to make a deal with the beast, so that hopefully they can both go home.
Come, Gregory. There is much to be done.
And then you'll show us the way home, right?
Of course. We made a promise, didn't we?
Greg's concern for his brother leads us to this chapter's love word, Storge, or familial love. This is the naturally occurring, instinctual love that family members have for each other. It's a love that looks past transgressions way more readily than most other loves. And it's no wonder, because every insult and put down that Wirt has thrown at Greg has just bounced right off of him. Greg doesn't even think twice about giving up his free ride home for the sake of his brother. He loves him unconditionally. Greg freely gives himself to the beast to save Wirt. And although this little child doesn't fully understand the gravity of the situation he's put himself in, he's acting on love. Familial love. When Wirt wakes up to see that Greg is gone, he gathers the strength to pull himself out of the Edelwood branches and rushes out to find his lost brother.
What did I do? Greg!
Wirt has just gone through a huge transformation. After leaving Greg to wander the woods several times, blaming him for everything, or otherwise acting mostly cold to him, Wirt suddenly cares now. Wirt worries for his brother's safety because he loves him back. Wirt, who was once cut off from love, living only in the introspective emotions of self-pity, personal fear, and ennui, is now frightened that he's just lost someone very important to him. Wirt now feels the instinctual love between brothers, Storge love, just like Greg has all along. Running to find his brother, Wirt falls in a lake, an echo of his fate in real life for those who already know. After the icy water claims his consciousness, he's pulled from certain doom by a true friend, Beatrice. Wirt's not as alone as he thought. Wirt's indifference has cost him his brother, but perhaps Wirt's love can bring him back. We've known for a while that Wirt fancies a girl back at home. With his talk of lost love in Chapter 1, the crush he mentions at Endicott's house, and the discussion around the campfire about how he can't seem to catch a break with this girl he likes. Wirt obviously has some pretty strong romantic feelings toward this girl Sarah, so of course we were bound to come to a chapter that has its focus based on romantic love. Or Eros for my Greek audience. We know that Wirt thinks about Sarah a lot, and now at the start of this special flashback episode, we see Wirt's life before he entered the unknown. He's just recorded a tape for Sarah, sampling his poetry and clarinet to show her his inner self.
That tape has got poetry and clarinet on it, Greg. Poetry and clarinet!
We'll soon see that she seems pretty fond of him too. Though Wirt appears to be clueless of that fact, Wirt plays up the night in his head. As he prepares to finally open his heart to Sarah, he records the perfect tape and finds the perfect Halloween costume.
Yes.
Everything must be perfect.
Yes.
Wirt is as ready as he's going to get, and he ventures off to share his personal feelings with the girl he likes.
Into the unknown.
But now outside of his house and in the cold real world, the people he meets are not as careful with his emotions as he is. Greg, who just wants to hurry things along so he can go on a frog hunt tonight, grabs Wirt's specially prepared tape and hands it over to a group of Sarah's friends. They're a little sassy when they find out about Wirt's feelings, which embarrasses him quite a bit.
Wirt loves Sarah! You want us to give it to her for you?
It's for a different Sarah.
They lightly tease him about his costume that he, in one scene previous, was so proud of.
So what are you, Wirt? Some kind of gnome?
I don't know. Well, see, I thought I'd just...
Wirt also catches word that Jason Funderburker already has plans to ask Sarah out at the Halloween party tonight. Hearing that he's got competition, Wirt immediately cancels everything. His perfect plan that he labored over was just met with slight resistance, so he decided it was an abject failure. He heads home, once again waxing poetic about his sorry state.
Is the dove never to meet the sea for want of the odious mountain?
Wirt sees Jason Funderburker as the whole package, the guy who has everything he doesn't, a real winner. But of course, we'll see he's...
Hey, Sarah, are you ready to go?
Wirt was so eager to get home after this bad news, he forgot all about the tape that's on its way to Sarah as they speak. Wirt assumes, since he always assumes the worst of people, that Sarah and Jason are going to listen to it and make fun of him, so he has to get that tape back. The boys show up to the Halloween party that Sarah's hanging at. Wirt is afraid to go inside since he wasn't invited, but it's unclear if that's actually true or Wirt just assumes that it's true. Maybe no one was formally invited. No one seems to be put off by his presence, and some people, namely Sarah, are glad to see him show up. Sarah invites Wirt to hang out at the graveyard with some other kids, but Wirt declines the invitation, seeing that Jason Funderburker has already staked his claim. Sarah really wants Wirt to join them. She says it twice.
Hey, you should come. Well, see ya, hopefully.
But Wirt is so down on himself, he's actually making Sarah's night that much worse. It wouldn't be the first time his own self-doubt got in the way of other people's plans.
You're a stubborn jerk. When are you gonna give this up?
Maybe never.
Eventually, Wirt shows up at the graveyard, the Eternal Garden, with the other kids. There we see Jason Funderburker with no game at all, doing his best to impress Sarah. She's not feeling it and politely rejects him. But Wirt only sees the crowd adoring his rival and hating him. If anything, this flashback shows that Wirt doesn't really have any friends, or at least he seems to think he has no friends. When Greg's gregariousness blows Wirt's cover, Sarah once again is real glad to see Wirt shown up, but Wirt still can't seem to comprehend that. At this point, the police come in and ruin the kids' Halloween fun. They all scatter. Wirt jumps up on the garden wall just in time to see Sarah and Jason discover his embarrassing tape.
That's it. That's the end.
Wirt has finally crossed the threshold of beginning to connect with someone, only to see it as a definitive end. He's so emotionally naked right now, and the risk of getting hurt is too great. He can't imagine being loved like he wants to be. If life is about the risks you take to connect with others, by giving up in this moment, Wirt is giving up on living his life. And with that, Wirt jumps over the garden wall.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
Wirt becomes angry with Greg, blaming him for all of tonight's missteps. In his tirade, Wirt even calls out his own stepdad for trying to get him to join marching band. Clearly, the guy wants his stepson to have a healthy social life, but Wirt thinks so little of himself, he's mad when people try to help him. Greg suggests marching band could help him hang out with Sarah more, but Wirt has decided he's moved on from her now.
That ship has sailed, Greg.
He's just opened up to her and can already imagine her disdain toward him. At that point, Greg finds a frog in the bushes, finally satisfying his frog hunt needs, and insists they give him a name.
I don't want to have anything to do with you or that frog.
Wirt has long expected the worst from people, only to be proven time and time again that they're not as bad as they seem. But really, the only intentional cruelness that we see in this whole show, besides the Beast and his direct agents, is from Wirt himself. Wirt has cut himself off from everyone. Friends, girlfriends, family. He's afraid of other people, and he doesn't seem to care for himself very much either. Just then, a train comes down the tracks they're standing on, causing them to leap down a steep, bumpy hill, plunging Greg, Wirt, and the newly found frog into a pond where they sink unconscious. There's a C.S. Lewis quote from his book The Four Loves, and though his views tend to skew very Christian for an agnostic story about pumpkin gods and zombies, his words feel applicable here. There is no safe investment. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything and your heart will certainly be wrung, and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all of the dangers and perturbances of love is hell. After giving up on love, Wirt has placed himself in his own personal hell. Wirt wakes up from his flashback dream, surrounded by Beatrice's family. Remembering his lost little brother, Wirt now knows it's time to act. He loves Greg and must save him. Concerned, Beatrice's mom tells Wirt to wait for the snowstorm to pass. But Wirt, who always needed things to be perfect, and would crumble under the slightest inconvenience, Wirt, who at the start of his journey always chose the path of inaction, even to the detriment of himself and others, he now ignores the bird's warning, and instead chooses decisive action. He must act, and he must act now.
You'd be no good to your brother dead.
I was never any good to him alive, either.
Wirt's been living his life as if he was already dead, never taking a chance on anyone. After replaying his last memories in the real world, Wirt regrets how he's treated everyone. With his new eyes, he sees that he's been hurting others by hating himself. He was cruel to Greg. He wouldn't give his stepdad a chance, even though he seems to care about Wirt. He deprived Sarah of a fun night together that she instead spent with Jason Funderburker, who she's not that fond of. And then his fight with Beatrice, which ended with her saving his life. Wirt assumed everyone doesn't like him. He assumed everyone wants to laugh at him. And Wirt just wanted to retreat back into his lonely bedroom. But not anymore. Wirt has a responsibility to the world. The people that he cares about need him. And he knows you can't always wait for conditions to be perfect. So he walks off into the blizzard to meet his destiny and enter Act 3. As Wirt braves the elements to seek out his brother, he runs into Beatrice, who's also looking for him.
Beatrice, you should go home.
Wirt now has the confidence in himself that he can in fact handle this on his own. He also has the empathy not to put a friend in danger. He's not coming from a place of bitterness or isolation this time. This time it's a place of responsibility.
I can't. Not until Greg is safe.
Beatrice too has learned a bit of empathy. She won't forgive herself unless she helps fix what she had a hand in causing. She's remorseful and willing to make up for what she did wrong, even if it puts herself at risk. Because at the very start of Act 2, Beatrice was going to sacrifice these kids so that she could get home herself. And now when one of these very same kids is telling her to go home, she's saying no. Wirt agrees to let her come along. He trusts her and respects her choice to put herself in danger if she wants to. And he knows that while he is strong enough to go alone now, he's stronger with friendship. No one's exploiting anyone this time. Wirt and Beatrice are now a team of equals. Meanwhile, when the woodsman finds Greg slowly becoming a tree, he's awakened to the fact that the Edelwoods that he's been chopping down have actually been the souls of those lost in the woods. The woodsman never knew that he was hurting people this whole time. Perhaps he thought that if he turned his heart away from others and stayed on task, his suffering would just be his own. But surely if he had talked to people, like say those folks in the tavern, he would have learned about the beast's dark methods. Similar to Wirt's recent realization, the woodsman now sees avoiding entanglements with others can still cause harm.
Would you have just let your daughter's spirit burn out forever?
Do not speak of my daughter. She would not wish this.
The woodsman sees that he's been going against the memory of his daughter by obsessing over this grim task. He's been keeping her half alive all this time in that lantern, not dealing with the real grief of his loss. Sometimes you can't cut yourself off from your emotions. Sometimes love is feeling the pain. Wirt arrives on the scene and now sees Greg turning into an Edelwood tree. Greg tries to apologize to Wirt, but Wirt knows he isn't to blame.
It's my fault we ended up here. Everything's been my fault.
No excuses, no passing the buck. Wirt takes responsibility. Wirt loves his brother, and it hurts to see him like this. And this time, he's not shutting down when things get too much to bear. He's crying legit tears of love. He's feeling his emotions, because sometimes love is feeling the pain. But Greg has been having his own character arc on the side. Back in the real world, he had stolen a rock with a face painted on it from his neighbor's house. And now he's realizing that stealing is wrong, and he wants to return the rock. The beast finally intervenes, giving Wirt the ultimate test of his character arc.
Your brother is too weak to go home. He will soon become part of my forest.
I won't let that happen.
Perhaps we better make a deal.
The beast offers to put Greg's spirit in the lantern, and as long as the flame stays lit, he will live on inside. This is exactly the deal he made with the woodsman for his daughter. Yes, we've come full circle.
Take on the task of lantern bearer, or watch your brother perish.
The beast's terms are not optimal. Greg will be banished to a lantern, and Wirt will be closed off forever from others, just like the woodsman. In this moment, Wirt sees this sacrifice as a necessary noble act. Everyone has a torch to burn. This will be his burden to bear.
Okay.
Wirt!
This is in fact the conclusion that the woodsman helped Wirt reach at the end of the first episode.
It is your burden to bear.
But what about that second episode, after Wirt meets Beatrice?
And then what are you gonna do? Just wander around this way and that way through the woods forevermore?
I don't know.
Wirt didn't have an answer to this back then. But what about now? We've finally come to the last love word in the series, Philautia, or self-love. We all need a certain amount of appreciation and empathy toward ourselves, an unconditional self-acceptance. Without self-love, it's harder to love other people because we might judge them with the harshness as we judge ourselves. Wirt tends to assume that people are going to screw him over, like when he thought Beatrice left him in Pottsville, or like when he thought Beatrice left him with Adelaide. He even assumes several characters want to kill him, such as the Pumpkin People, and Auntie Whispers, and the Woodsman. Wirt also assumes that his fellow classmates want nothing to do with him, when it's clear that at least Sarah actively wants him around. So we see that Wirt's low self-image keeps him from enjoying other people's company. It's harder to express love when you yourself feel unlovable. If you feel unworthy, you might just keep punishing yourself. And this moment with the Beast is the final test of this philosophy. The Beast has presented Wirt with a scenario that would in theory save Greg to an extent, but doom Wirt to a lifetime of isolation, wandering the woods, forever hating himself for letting Greg down. It's a selfless act, but it's too selfless.
There has to be another way.
At this point, Wirt sees that no good can come from punishing himself like that.
What are you gonna do? Just wander around through the woods forevermore?
Wait, that's dumb. I'm not just gonna wander around in the woods for the rest of my life.
And there he's finally answered Beatrice's question. People need people. We've seen it time and time again in every episode. Wirt has love for his friends, his family, and his community. And it would suck to be alone forever. And it would suck for them to be without him. Wirt sees himself as worth saving.
You just have some weird obsession with keeping this lantern lit. It's almost like Your soul is in this lantern.
Word is catching on. The beast promises to end suffering, but only tells you what you think you want to hear. Things to justify your suffering rather than a way out. The beast is a liar.
Don't believe his lies.
In a last-ditch attempt, the beast threatens Wirt with his greatest fear, the unknown.
Are you ready to see true darkness?
But Wirt is ready for that now.
Are you?
Don't!
Wirt sees that the beast isn't to be feared at all. He's stronger than the beast. The beast needs Wirt to isolate himself, but Wirt's done doing that. In his final act in the world of the unknown, Wirt hands the lantern back over to the woodsman. He himself needs to come to terms with his own grief. The woodsman needs the opportunity to see through the lie he's been living this whole time.
She was never in the lantern, was she, beast?
You'll never see your daughter again, woodsman.
The woodsman blows out the lantern, finally confronting the darkness, a life where he can properly grieve his lost daughter and move on. And after giving Beatrice the magic scissors she needs to save her family, Wirt says a heartfelt goodbye to his dear friend.
Goodbye, Beatrice.
Goodbye, Wirt.
Wirt awakens, back in the real world, in the pond at the edge of drowning. He pulls his brother and frog companion out of the water. As Wirt collapses on the ground, the friends who he thought didn't care for him come to his rescue. Wirt awakens in the hospital to see everyone there. Sarah tells Wirt she wants to listen to his tape, but she doesn't have a cassette player. There's still a chance for Wirt to take it back and forget about her. But this time, he leans into the unknown.
You can listen to it at my house. Yes.
The conditions may not be perfect, but they don't need to be. Wirt has finally opened himself up to the risks of love, and has saved himself from a life of sadness and isolation. He's finally going to start acting alive. In the end, Wirt had a hand in bringing more love into everyone's lives. The woodsman actually gets his daughter back, now seeing the truth. Lorna gets her leisure time with her beloved Auntie Whispers. Lady Grey gets Endicott overcoming their fear of ghosts. The toy maker has new inspiration for his craft. Langtree and Jimmy Brown are together. Enoch hangs out with his new skeleton buddies. Beatrice, now having learned a valuable lesson about communication and empathy, has confessed to her family that she was the one who turned them into bluebirds, and they completely forgave her. And Greg, the boy who impulsively stole from people, puts the rock back, now knowing he's not the only person in the world. People need people. And although love is scary, and love is painful, the alternative is nothing, and the rewards are everything. Death finds us all eventually. All we have to do is wait. But love has to be welcomed in. And it's that act of trust, more than the menial tasks and hobbies and navel-gazing and nihilism, that makes life more than a meaningless obligation. It makes life life. Thank you so much for joining me on this trip through one of my favorite shows. If you like this video and you want to support the channel financially, there's a link to my Ko-fi account in the description. But if you're low on funds and you still want to help out, why not post your favorite Storyograph video on Reddit somewhere? Might I suggest my video on How To with John Wilson? With such a dedicated fan base, I'm kind of surprised more people haven't discovered my video on it. It contains some behind-the-scenes footage. And as implied earlier, next time we're going to circle back around and take a look at Greg's character arc, and maybe finally understand that phrase, loveliest lies of all. That was the longest video I ever put out, and you made it all the way to the end. You even sat through the embarrassing part when I asked for money. Write your favorite frog name in the comments if you got this far. You could be part of an elite team of full video watchers that includes my parents and the YouTube employee who checked this for monetization restrictions.
That driver is nuts.
Well, he was a lot more discreet than you f***ing idiots.